10% of Netflix users are inactive. What do you do? Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have a product management mock interview with Chloe. And before we get started, Chloe, can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Chloe Ene. I'm about to be an RPM at Facebook in a couple of months. So yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome, love to see it. So for today's question, suppose you're a PM at Netflix. You notice that 10% of Netflix users are inactive. What do you do?
Okay. So the first thing I would want to do is, to just clarify a few things. So do we already have like a set understanding on what we would consider inactive, or is that something you want me to define myself? Like, are we saying, you know, we haven't seen X amount of users or 10% of users logging in X amount of time? Or is that something you want me to just figure out?
Yeah, if you can figure that out, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Alrighty, yeah. So that's pretty much the only thing that I would want to clarify off the bat. Maybe something else actually. So am I assuming that, I can get information from you, like your like my data science team or whatever. I can just get more information for you to kind of quantify the problem.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So I'll think about my structure for a little bit and then I'll hop right into my answer. So in terms of structure, I'm thinking that first I want to get some more information, kind of quantify the problem, right? If I was a PM at Netflix, these are the steps that I would take. And then I'll propose like a game plan and then evaluate and just think through, what a final like starting point would be for me. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. So just to ground myself here a little bit, when I think about Netflix, right, and if they're like what their overarching mission would be, I would say that it's to keep users happy or like entertained, right? So some like high level objective could look like as a company like Netflix, we would want to maintain X number of active users, you know, like at a given time, let's say like week to week or even monthly, like X number of active users. And so delving into what I would consider activity, right? Netflix is pretty straightforward. You kind of just log in and you watch content. So in my head, I would think activity to be, frequently logging in. That could be, again, some time that would make sense for us, like frequently logging in, and then also engaging with content. So when I think about engagement, I think about, like rating, like up or down, or maybe adding, content to your list. And Netflix has that thing where it's like my list, and you can add like shows that you watch frequently or movies that you watch frequently. That's kind of what I'm thinking about for activity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you've listed several different things here, like pressing the ratings, the logging in action. I'm wondering if you had to just pick one activity, what would you say is the most critical for you to define a user as active?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in my head, I'd probably say that first one, right? So like logging in and then like clicking or watching at least one thing, right? So logging in and then clicking on a show, clicking play and like watching it.
Okay.
That's kind of what I would think is like active, right? So that action is happening, let's say, like week to week or even just over some time, let's say week to week.
All right, so just this activity of logging in and watching a show, 10% of users are not doing this. So now we want to know what you would do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to kind of just hone in. So 10% of users are not logging in and they're not watching content. Why? Like, what would I do? How would I go about solving that? Okay, so to check back in with my little like plan that I came up with, quantify the issue, propose game plan, and then evaluate. We're still under quantifying the issue. So what I'd want to do next is kind of hypothesize, right? Get some more information and see whether I can sort of diagnose the issue at hand. So going through a few things here. I know that the streaming market is kind of saturated or is heading towards saturation. A lot of people are coming out with new services. So I would ask you, as my go-to person on my team, are there any like new streaming services that have come up recently or in that same time frame that we noticed the drop in activity?
I've looked at some reports and news articles, and it seems like Disney Plus is pretty big. We definitely still have traditional competitors like Hulu and HBO.
Okay. So in my head, though, those maybe have been around for at least 6 months. So in the past, let's say in the past month, there haven't been any like new people coming out, or like Disney Plus or Hulu haven't like changed their plans, like made it like super cheap or anything like that.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, cool. And then have we done anything differently? Like, did we switch around, where the play button is, or did we make everything green on the front screen? Like, did we change anything on our end recently?
The engineering team is just always shipping new things every week, so it's kind of hard to tell. But just overall, there haven't been any major feature changes or improvements or new features shipped.
Cool. So they ship new things, so nothing like out of the ordinary has happened.
Right. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So have we released any new content lately? Like, have we? I know obviously Corona put a stop in our regular production cycle, but have we like released anything new lately?
Yeah, so with COVID, we have seen a slowdown in the new content that's been released.
All right. So nothing new lately. Cool. And then just a final thing, or a final couple of things I'll say. Is this happening like in all countries? Like we're seeing this drop like amongst all our users, nowhere in particular?
Yeah, globally.
Okay. Globally. Um, and then a final thing, are we trending on Twitter? Do we have any bad PRs? Anyone talking about us writing articles? Did we do something really bad lately?
It's just this typical memes about Netflix. There isn't really anything negative there.
Typical memes, nothing negative. Perfect. Okay, so just to recap the information that we have so far, um, aren't any new like major streaming services that's come into the market recently. So we know of our Disney Pluses, our Hulu's, or our Disney Plus and our Hulu, and they haven't done anything radical. Like they haven't made their plans super cheap or anything like that. Nothing like new or out of the ordinary on our end. We obviously, because of Corona, haven't been releasing any new content, and then thankfully we are not trending on Twitter. Nothing crazy has happened, and then obviously we're seeing this drop all across the board. Perfect. Um, yeah, so I think now I probably want to pivot into proposing my game plan, right? If I could conclude, given all the information that I've gotten so far, I think I'd probably conclude that our users are just kind of bored. I'm kind of I'm gonna hypothesize, or not hypothesize, I'm going to center my game plan around that assumption that our users are bored, and that's what we're targeting. That's the reason why we've seen that drop, that 10% drop in activity from our users. Does that sound good, or is there anything else you want me to consider?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, great. So I think an overall goal here, because we identified the problem to be users aren't logging in and watching, right? So our goal here would be to get users to log in and watch. In other words, get their attention. In other words, spice it up, right? We want our users to be happy and entertained. So I've thought about this in a few ways, or I've come up with a few solutions of what I would do if I was a PM at Netflix. The first thing I think about is, along those same lines of like getting our users' attention. I would want to do something like a Netflix Wrapped or like a Netflix recap. So kind of similar to what Spotify has done over the past couple of years, where users, either at the end of the year or we could just kind of drop it by surprise, like right now, given the situation at hand. Um, users get like a recap of like content that they've engaged with in the past, or like their favorite shows or things that they've rewatched a certain number of times, just to get the buzz going. A pro there would be obviously leveraging social media, like getting people talking is always a good thing. Well, not necessarily always a good thing, but we can get their attention that way. Actually, a con would be that it could potentially backfire. So one thing that we know happens is that multiple people maybe use one Netflix account. It's pretty common. And so we could potentially have a situation where like, hey, this was your favorite show and this is what you did. And it actually wasn't me, it was my sister who has refused to stop using my Netflix account. So that would be, a potential con in that case.
So if the problem here is that people are bored with the content, what do you think the goal for such a Netflix recap would be? What would it do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in my head, because we technically can't like go out into the world and interview however many, I wouldn't say million like subscribers we have, or like how many are inactive, we'd want to sort of like get their attention in some way. And so because I hypothesized, or the like conclusion that I came to, my hunch was that users were bored. I feel like one thing that, sort of a recap or like a wrapped thing would do, or could potentially do, is just get them excited again, like remind them of like old content that they used to watch, or like haven't watched them, especially because you did mention that we haven't like been putting out new content recently. So it's very possible that they may have felt like, oh, I've binge watched everything that I already used to like, but there's that one show that I used to love, like my sophomore year of high school, that I haven't watched in forever. So that's just kind of some way to like bring them back around, get them excited again about their accounts. Sorry, did that make sense? I'm kind of going forward.
Yeah, it makes sense. I see you're kind of trying to get them to come back through some throwback content.
Exactly, exactly. That's pretty much the point there. Um, yeah, I was going to say one thing. Oh, yeah. So one thing that we could also leverage again, because this would be great for users who, um, have been inactive in the sense that they haven't been logging in, but maybe they've been users for a long time. So we have a great idea of like what they like what they used to watch. We have like a lot of their, previous history and previous data that we could leverage. So that's what I'm thinking about with that first idea. And then to go through these really quickly, the next thing I would want to do is content, right? So this could either be new content or like reviving old content. And so what I mean by that is like we have a reputation, or we maybe sort of developed a reputation of like canceling things after like a couple of seasons. So in this case, we'd either want to bring up new content, or maybe I don't know if you can uncancel a show, or like bring back a show that we may have canceled recently or in the past. And so a pro here would be obviously new stuff, like if there's new content being put out, people love that. Another pro also would be that we can sort of leverage that fan base that we may have upset in the past. So bringing back a show that people love that we had to cancel for whatever reason, would be able to get maybe some of those inactive users active again, or and potentially even bring in new users. Which would tie back to that first thing I said, right? Like maybe for us, our main like high level goal is to always have like X number of users like active, at a given time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and then so some cons obviously would be Corona. Like we had mentioned that there was a pause in our production cycle because of COVID. I know some production companies are able to have been able to start setting things back up again. So potentially we could look into that, but I think logistically it would still be a bit challenging to like get like brand new content in. Another thing is legally, I'm not sure what like bringing back content that had been canceled, or like shows that had been canceled, what that would look like, because there probably was a reason why we had to cancel them if we lost the rights or anything like that. Yeah, so just COVID, logistics, and then legal stuff. Also time, right? Producing new content always like that takes time. So if we're looking at a drop of 10% of users over like whatever period we define, then we can't like promise them like new content in a week, right? It will take some time to get that up and produce. Okay, so the final thing that I want to look at are new features. So the first idea I have under this is what I want to call the in the mood quiz. And so how this would work is you log in. So for the users that are inactive, if we're able to identify those specific users, you log in onto your Netflix, and you're able to sort of like do a little quiz, like like is this a movie night, or is this just a binge shows on your own kind of night, right? And so with that information, like with the answers they give, we can then like suggest like, hey, why don't you watch this show, or why don't you like rewatch the show that you used to like. So a pro here would be giving people like an exciting way to find new content. And then obviously a con is that it might just be annoying, it might backfire. Like maybe people like log on and they just don't want to take that quiz. Hopefully there'd be a way to like X out or something, but it could still just be like potentially give a dip in their user experience. And then the second thing and last thing that I want to look at under those like new features, the new features idea is, so you know how on that there are those little like there are all the different rows of content, and so there's like the first row that's like trending right now, like around the world, or there's like my list, and there's recently added and stuff like that. And so a row that I would propose would be something like you used to love this, or like you haven't watched this in a while. So it would accomplish the same thing as what we said with the Netflix recap thing, just getting people reminded about what they used to love, or like what they what they haven't engaged with in a while. And so it'd be a great way to like re-engage people. And then a potential con is that it just might go unnoticed. I know that there are a bunch of those shows like Oscar nominated, blah, blah, blah. And then if you don't scroll all the way down, you may not see, the like you used to love this row, or whatever you want to call it. So to recap, we looked at the Netflix recap, no pun intended, new content or reviving old content, or bringing back shows that have been canceled, and then finally the new features, which would be the in the mood quiz and you used to love this like grow. Yeah, do you have any feedback? Would you like me to narrow down on one that I would probably like propose to my team, like, hey, we should do this to get our users active again?
In the beginning, we talked about how these users are inactive and we defined them as they're not logging in and they're not watching a show. So if they're not logging in, they probably wouldn't see those two new features that you're building, no matter how cool they are. I'm wondering how you might start them and bring them back to the funnel.
That's a great idea. So if I may, I think what I would do is probably not go with those two features to start. Like if I had to propose like one out of the several different solutions that I propose, I probably wouldn't go with the new features because, like you said, obviously if people aren't logging in, then they're not going to see it anyway. And again, because we're trying to sort of maximize attention, like an attention grabbing solution, one that we think that would really get them hooked or most users hooked, I think I probably would lean into that first one, so the Netflix recap, next Netflix wrapped thing. And the main reason for that, especially like you said, our goal here obviously is to get users to watch, right? But before they watch, they have to log in. And one thing that I know like the Spotify wrap thing did is like it got a lot of people like wanting to log in, right? Like, hey, I want to know what my Spotify wrap says. So in that same regard, if we're able to drop this, it gets users talking. Obviously, again, leveraging social media, everyone's talking about like, hey, either, and it could be either a good way or a bad way. It could be like, hey, my Netflix wrapped is like kind of bad. It just gets people talking, gets everyone like, hey, let me go log into Netflix. I haven't logged in a while. What's on my Netflix wrapped? And that just like gets them back onto our platform, and then that most likely will encourage them to either watch something that was in their wrapped, or like, hey, I haven't scrolled through Netflix in a while. Like, what haven't I watched? And then watch content and make them happy. So yeah, that's sort of what I would do if I was a PM at Netflix and I came across this issue.
Awesome. Just one quick follow up question. What are some metrics you would use to determine success?
Okay. So the metrics that I would look at first, I'd want to look at weekly active subscribers or active users. So in this case, because our initial problem was that users aren't logging in, they're not active. I'd want to see after we've pushed out like our Netflix Wrapped or recap solution, are our users like how are they feeling? Like, are they coming back? Are they engaging with content? So I'd look over week to week initially just to get a feel and make sure that we're seeing that dip like even out or like go back up into users being active again. And then the other thing that I would look at is if we're thinking of, I didn't really delve much into what the Netflix recap would look like, but say we have a thing where it's like, here are all the shows that you watched like last year, right? And it shows you like five, or here are your top five shows that you watched last year, like three shows or whatever. Of the content that was, given to say you as like a Netflix user, here are the three shows. I want to see like how many of our users went back and actually engaged with the content that we kind of highlighted in the recap. So this would help us see like whether that was not only effective in getting people to log in, like that'd be a great way to say like, okay, yes, they actually logged in, they actually looked at their recap, but we'd also want to see whether they went that extra step and like watched or like engaged with the content that we've pushed out to them. Yeah, and so I'd probably look at those hand in hand initially after if we were to go with that solution.
Cool. And if you had to pick one as your North Star?
North Star would be the first one. Just again, seeing like have people logged in, like have they watched anything? So that would be the weekly active users over, and I really monitor that metric like over, say the first like 3 weeks after we pushed out the Netflix recap solution.
Awesome, Chloe. So this is awesome for our interview. We're done here. And I'm curious, before I give you any feedback, if you could give some self reflection.
Okay, so in terms of self feedback, I think the first thing I'd probably do is slow down. I feel like I got a little better over time, but in the beginning, just making sure that I'm kind of pacing myself, not talking too quickly. Um, I think I did a good job of sort of checking in, although sometimes because I was talking really fast, I had to pause, like check in. But that's also super important. Making sure that you're kind of looped in with me at each point. Um, I think I probably should have asked a bit more, clarifying questions. One thing that I know I should have asked is like, is this happening over a particular time? So I kind of kept saying like, oh, sometime that like we define or like we would define. So I probably should have specified, like, hey, have we seen this drop like over a month, or this just happened in the past day? Um, and then, yeah, I think my structure was also kind of good. Just it was sort of high level, and I found that That's always best. And so instead of going into the like very detailed, this is what I'm going to say, and this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to say, just kind of keep it high level and making sure that I sort of check in with you as I go. Yeah, what did you think? You probably have a lot
Yeah.
more feedback for me.
Well, overall, I thought this was a great mock interview. I loved how in the beginning you stated the goal, which was around the active users, and throughout the entire interview, like 2 or 3 times, you always went back to that goal and thought like, hey, does this feature help us meet this goal? And that was really, really powerful. And you also had some really creative solutions around like Spotify recap and taking inspiration from like some sort of BuzzFeed quizzes kind of. And I really liked your approach on how you would tackle this. So like we went through the root cause pretty quickly and you were able to identify the root cause. And when we went through the solutions, I liked them. The one thing that I would say is just always remember in the beginning we defined the inactive users as they haven't logged in, so some of those solutions might not fit. Maybe some of those are longer term features after we meet some of the shorter term. And the last piece of feedback I have to give is around your metrics. I think the two you gave were good. One was super high level in terms of are we getting users, and the other one was around the engagement for the specific feature that you described, which was the recap feature. Two features or two metrics that I would add is one around acquisition, which is around how many people are coming in and using this. Maybe you're sending this through push notifications or emails. And then the other one is around retention. So if we bring back a user, are they a quality user? Do they come back and do they stay and are they retained? Overall, this was a great interview. Thanks. And for the audience, good luck in your upcoming PM interview.